Welcome back to the shop. This is a shaker-inspired two-step step stool with a cool little handle. It's a nice design feature. Makes it easier to move the stool around. You don't have to bend over to pick it up. This is one of those projects that you can easily start and finish in one weekend. If you'd like to build this project, I'll have a link to the plans right here, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that may come up during the build in this step-by-step video tutorial. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to build this step stool out of cherry, and this is an old cherry desktop. It's one of those desktops you may have made something like this, or if you haven't, maybe you will one day, where the desk is held with two filing cabinets. This one I ended up having a drawer. You can see that there was once a drawer here. I saved it just like every woodworker saves wood, thinking I might build something with it, and that day has finally come. So I'll go ahead and get started by ripping the parts for this step stool out of this old desktop. These boards were originally joined together with biscuits, so I'm bound to run into a few while I'm making the rips, and that's okay. I'll just make sure to orientate them during the build so they're not noticeable. Okay, these two boards I'll put to the side and save them for another project, unless I make a mistake. And I should be able to make this step stool with the three boards that I have right here. These boards measure a full 7/8 of an inch thick. So before I do anything else, I'm going to run the boards through the thickness planer and bring them down to 3/4 of an inch. That'll make the step stool look a little lighter and weigh a little less. After running the boards through the thickness planer, I'll run them through the drum sander to remove any snipe and bring them down to a true 3/4 of an inch. You probably noticed that I'm using SawStop's new miter gauge to make the crosscuts. This is new in the shop. SawStop sent this to me to check out. So I've been using it for a little while. It's a little bit of a change up for me. I used to make all of my crosscuts with the K-Pex. Before that, I was using my miter sled because the Bosch was really not that square. So I'll use this for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. These are the two sides of the step stool. This is the side with the handle. I'll cut that knot away. This is the other side. And I'm going to trace this. What I want to do is use the table saw to cut almost to where I think it's 1 3/4 inch mark. I don't want to go quite there. I'll finish the rest with the handsaw. And then from that point, I'll measure out to 1 1/4 inch, and that'll give me that slight taper for the left-hand handle. Now I'll use the handsaw and cut it to the mark. At the top here, I think actually 1 1/8 inch looks pretty good. I'll make a mark. Then use a straight edge and connect where I just cut with the handsaw. Bisect that mark and trace a line. For this cut, I'm going to use the bandsaw, and I'll apply pressure to the back of the blade as I'm making the cut, and that will help me stay on the line. I'm building the sides of the step stool in two parts that will be joined together later, so it's possible to cut the lap joints with the table saw. Here I'm cutting the fronts of the sides to length. These are the boards that will support the bottom step. I've adjusted the height of the blade to 3/4 of an inch and set up a stop block to cut a lap joint in the front of the step stool. I'll make that first cut on both sides, then remove the stop block and plow out the rest of the material. I'm fortunate enough to have two table saws in the shop. This is the Powermatic, which I've had for just about 30 years, and I like to run a blade with a flat ground tooth in the saw, and that will keep the bottom of the lap joint nice and flat. I've readjusted the stop block, and now I'll cut the lap joint for the brace in the back. I was going to put the lap joint for the brace in the center of this bottom board at the front of the step, but instead, I think what I'm going to do is actually I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it right in the very front, under the first step. So I'll set up the stop block and plow all of that material out. Now that I have the lap joints cut, I'll join the boards together to create the sides. I'm going to use dominoes to help join the boards together. That will add a little strength and also help with alignment. If you don't have a domino, you could also use dowels. I've let the glue set up for a few hours. Now I'll take the boards out of the clamps and move on to the next step. Now I'm going to make a pattern for the detail at the bottom of the step stool. I've ripped this piece of plywood at 2 inches, and now I'm going to cut a 22.5 angle at one end. Measuring from the long point of the angle, I'll make a mark at 7.5. I'm going to have to, yeah, that works. I'm centering the pattern on the bottom, so I have 2 inches on each side. I'll put the pattern in between those two marks. Make sure I'm flush at the bottom and trace a line. And I'll cut this out on the bandsaw. Back at the table saw, I'll use the stop block and the miter gauge to cut the braces to length. Since I'm building this step stool out of cherry, I thought I'd take a minute and tell you a few things about cherry wood and also show you some of the cherry projects that I have here on my channel. Number one, cherry gets dark, and it gets dark pretty quickly. This is a piece of cherry that I just ripped, and here is a step stool that I made about 2 years ago. Quite a difference. Another thing about cherry is it's relatively inexpensive compared to other domestic woods that you might want to build a piece of furniture with. Like walnut and white oak are far more expensive than cherry. Also, I think that cherry is timeless. So it's definitely a good wood to consider if you're going to build furniture. So a few of the projects that I've built and I have plans for. Number one is the cherry entrance table. This table has continuous wood grain in the drawer fronts, has a little bead molding in the apron, and it's also built with pocket hole joinery. So it's really designed for the beginner woodworker. The next one is the cherry bench. This one has turned legs, but if you don't have a lathe, you could also make it with tapered legs. I did add the bead molding again to the bottom of the apron. And with this project, you'll notice that I joined the boards for the seat at the sapwood. This acts as a design element, and it also does a good job of hiding the seam where the boards are joined. The next one is the cherry game table, and I made this table to match the cherry entrance table. Again, it has the bead molding at the bottom of the apron, the continuous wood grain in the drawer front, and this project is built with pocket hole joinery to make it more of an approachable project for the beginner to intermediate woodworker. This next one is the cherry step stool built with dovetails, and this is just a classic little step stool. It gets used heavily in my home. I have it out here in the shop now to just give it a light sanding and add another coat of varnish. And just like the step stool that I'm building right now, another coat of varnish will make this step stool, in my opinion, better than new. The last one is the project that I'm working on right now, and I think that makes a nice little collection of cherry wood furniture. I hope one of these projects inspires you to spend some more time in the shop. And if you build any of them, please share them on Instagram and tag me so I can see what you build and share your projects on my Instagram. Now let's go ahead and get back to the project. Okay, so now the step stool is starting to take shape. The next step is to cut the bottom and top step. I'm going to have a 1/2 inch overhang on the front of the steps and a 3/4 inch overhang off the sides. I'll need to make a notch at the top step for the handle. I'll cut this out with the bandsaw. I got all the parts to the step stool and I've sanded some of the areas that'll be difficult to get to once it's assembled. The next step is to countersink holes for the screws. And I'm just going to use one screw on each side of each one of these stretchers. So I'll measure in 3/8 of an inch, which is the center of 3/4, and mark a line on both sides. I'll bring this over to the drill press and drill the holes. It's 2 inches, so center is 1. I'm using a very sharp 1/4 inch brad point drill bit to countersink the holes, and I'm going to fill the holes with square pegs. That's something I haven't done on this channel before, but it's really cool, and I think it's going to look great on this project, and I'll get into the details in a little bit. I'm building the stool with 1 5/8" trim screws, and since cherry is a hardwood, I'll pre-drill the holes to help prevent breaking the screw or stripping the head. I'm filling the holes with square pegs, and this is something I learned way back in the mid-80s working for my boss Bob Waltzak at the Woodworker. We used to build everything in pine, soft pine. It was kind of that country pine look of the 80s, if you remember that, if you're old enough to remember that. And we'd screw everything together and then plug the holes with square pegs. You have to be a little more careful with cherry just because it's a harder wood, but so far, so good. Kind of clean that glue up around the end of the peg so it doesn't get in the saw blade. Clog up the teeth of the blade. And I'll cut it pretty flush. And hit the rest with a sanding block. The steps of the stool will be attached with 4 evenly spaced screws. Before attaching the steps, I'll use the hand plane to add a slight chamfer to the bottom of each step. When I attach the steps, I'll use the same 1 5/8" trim screws and fill the holes with square pegs. After sanding the pegs flush, I then decided to distress this project, which was a lot of fun. It's something I haven't done in a long time. I learned how to woodwork way back in the 80s, so that's something that we did a lot back then, and I haven't done it really much since, and I haven't done it at all on this channel, but definitely, I think, fitting for this project. I did shoot some video, and I'll be posting that in the next couple of days. I'll show you the tools and the method to make these distress marks, and then we'll also finish the step stool. This is a wipe-on varnish, which is very easy to use, and the nice thing about that is with a project like this that's intended to get used 2 or 3 years from now, this can get a light sanding, another coat or two of varnish, and it will almost be better than new. So I hope you enjoyed this project. Again, if you want to build the step stool or any of my woodworking projects, I'll have a link right here or down in the description below. And all of my woodworking project plans have step-by-step video tutorials right here on YouTube designed to help guide you through the project. So I hope that you'll check that out, and I hope that you build the furniture for your home. And if you do, let me see it, post it on Instagram. I'd love to see what you made, and I'd love to repost it on my Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you would like my help building the furniture for your home, I hope that you'll visit my website at johnpeters.com and check out my furniture project plans. With the large variety of projects and links to the video tutorials right here on YouTube, I know that you'll find something that will inspire you to spend more time in the shop and build something beautiful for your home.